What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name is Cameron, and today we're doing a head-to-head comparison, a bourbon battle, whatever you want to call it, between Stagg Jr. Batch 16 and Stagg Jr. Batch 17. Now, I'm going to be doing this for a couple of reasons. Let me run it down for you very quickly. The first one is obviously that I want to pick a winner or a better bourbon between these two. And we'll talk about why as it relates to, nose, palate, finish, all that kind of good stuff. The second reason I want to take a look at these is because I think this comparison is going to be a good sort of jumping off point, almost like a case study for me to, at least from my point of view, talk about what I like and what I don't like with particular Stagg Jr. releases. And then finally, the third reason that I want to do this is because the next batch is hitting shelves in select markets across the US right now. I have one of those on the way to me at this point, and when it gets here, I want to be able to make that review as soon as possible to get that out for all of you. Since I haven't reviewed these yet, I was like, let's go ahead and knock it all out at the same time. So that is what we're going to be doing. It's worth noting that these are the final two batches that are going to bear the Stagg Jr. name. They've dropped the Junior. This is just going to be Stagg from here on out. So for us whiskey nerds, I don't know if that's going to be Stagg Batch 18 or Stagg Batch 1. I don't know how we're going to refer to it from this point forward. I'm probably still going to call it Stagg Jr. until the bitter end, I guess. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the stats of these two whiskeys. The only difference that we're really going to note is the proof. So let me give you the rundown of what Stagg Jr. is very quickly. This is a non-age stated barrel proof product from Buffalo Trace. It is the low rye bourbon mash bill, which is commonly referred to as mash bill 1. We don't have the exact percentages of grains used in that mash bill. Even though this is not age stated, the rumor out there is that it's between 7 to 9 years old in this blend. And there's an extra rumor for this bottle, which is batch 17. Batch 17 was rumored to contain the rejected barrels from the George T. Stagg release that never happened in 2021. As we go through this and nose and taste this, we'll kind of talk about what I think about that rumor. I think MSRP is around maybe $50, $60. Secondary prices have exploded for Stagg Jr. recently, and now you're looking at like $250 to $325 for an average batch. I think that's it. I think we've covered everything. The way this is going to work is that I'm going to nose these side by side first, then taste them side by side, talk about them kind of back and forth, sprinkle in some other information, and I guess we'll rate both of them. I'll pick a winner, and then I'll be on my way. Batch 16 is 130.9, and batch 17 is 128.7. So basically a 2 proof point difference. Batch 16 on the nose. Wow, this is a really dark batch of Stagg Jr. All grape, plum, blackberry, just dark purple fruits all the way. And, as you would expect from a 7 to 9 year old barrel proof Buffalo Trace product, there's still a little bit of youth here. It's intense. There's a lot of ethanol on the nose. For me, that's never really gone away with any Stagg Jr. that I've ever smelled. Batch 16 here on the nose, to me, smells like what it is, which is a proofed up Buffalo Trace. You can smell the honey notes in here. Buffalo Trace standard, straight ahead 90 proof, has a lot of honey notes. And when you get to this level of proof, with generally a similar age, some of these Stagg Jr. batches carry those honey notes even into the higher proof. That is the case here. So it's all dark purple fruits. It's very sweet and a nice dark rich honey note in here. So let's go on to batch 17 now. Remember, we're moving down about 2 proof points. Not a big difference. Let's check this out on the nose. Much lighter. This is, there are similarities, of course. You could tell it's Stagg Jr., but fundamentally different in terms of where this thing is falling. If I had to talk about a flavor pyramid, which I like to do sometimes, think about bright flavors at the top, dark flavors at the bottom. This is very much in that bottom part of the pyramid. This one, completely opposite. Bright candied strawberry notes, kind of like batch 15. Lots of vanilla, but there's something ashy and bitter about this one. So to me, this very clearly demonstrates kind of the dichotomy of Stagg Jr. batches that I've picked up over the, I don't know, 6 or 7 batches that I've owned. They all kind of boil down to either being a dark batch or a light batch. That's the way that I think of them in my head. It's not consistent necessarily with some of what I'm going to talk about here, but I'm going to say that in this case, the lighter batch, batch 17, is a lot more bitter. It is sweet. There is vanilla. There is strawberry candy, kind of like batch 15. Whereas batch 15 was really sweet. Batch 17 here, even though it is as light as that batch, it's just weirdly bitter. Yeah. It's strange. I get a lot more grain here. It feels a little younger. It's more alcoholic. It's just got this weird bitter thing going on there. But then there is the redeeming quality of the light vanilla and the light strawberry candies. Going back to batch 16 now. Wow. Fundamentally darker, rounder, sweeter, more focused actually. Maybe less complex because of that, because there is a focus on those sweet purple fruits. But subjectively, I like that profile on the nose a little bit better than the brighter but more bitter profile. So at this point, batch 16 is winning on the nose. Let's go ahead and check out that batch on the palate now. Cheers. That is Stagg Jr. Dear God, I've been drinking quite a bit of whiskey this evening, and even still, this thing caught me by surprise. Just like the nose, it's a very focused profile on the palate. All of those sweet, dark fruits, blackberry, plum, grape, that kind of a profile. It's fantastic. There's a lot of spice here. It's right at the level of comfort for me in my palate. Even at, what is it, 130.9? Yeah. It's not the highest proof in the world, but it's just the way that it comes off. Proof doesn't mean anything if it drinks hot or it drinks, not hot. Proof is just a number. And in this case, this is drinking closer to like a hazmat bourbon. Really, really good, really focused, a nice dark profile. It's kind of what I look for in a Stagg Jr. So let's go on to batch 17 now and check this out on the palate. It's interesting. My palate has acclimated so much to the spice of that first sip from batch 16 that came off a little bit soft. And I don't want to put too much stock into that because it could just be that my palate acclimated, and now from this point forward, they're both going to feel a little bit more relaxed on the palate. Definitely a bright kind of medicinal cherry note in this. I mentioned candied strawberry on the nose. It turns a little bit darker, a little more medicinal on the palate, but on the back end now, here's that funky, weird bitterness in the finish. It's something that if I wasn't thinking about it, if I was just sipping this, watching TV, whatever, I might not pick up on it so much. But as I do this comparison, as I dig into these whiskeys, that bitterness on the back end of this batch 17 is very off-putting. I'm not a fan. And that's what I remember from this. I haven't done this comparison in probably 3 or 4 months. I'm going to do one more sip of each, try to dig in a little deeper into the tasting notes, into the palate experience, and then I'll give some final thoughts and we can wrap this thing up. So back to batch 16 now on the palate here. So rich, so dark. I love these dark batches of Stagg Jr. This reminds me of batch 12. It's not quite at the level of batch 12, and I have done that comparison before. Batch 12 has a little bit more of an oak presence to it. It's a little bit more complex and less one-dimensional, but this batch 16 on the palate is incredible. Maybe a hint of bitterness on the back end, but it's a little more of a flavorful bitterness, like a dark chocolate or like a coffee note. So let's go back to batch 17 now for one final sip, and then we'll kind of give some final wrap-up thoughts. Whew. Yep. That ain't it. It's getting grainier and younger. What the hell, man? That is weird. No. Batch 17. These are not rejected George T. Stagg barrels. You know what? Actually, they could be, because this should have been rejected. This is not good. So Does it taste 15 years old like George T. Stagg? Like they could have dumped that in there? Not at all to me, but if they did, there's a good reason why they didn't turn that into a George T. Stagg release. I wanted to read you guys something that I wrote about 6 months ago at this point for my patrons. I did a review of batch 17. It was freshly cracked. I thought maybe I was crazy, but I sat with this for like an hour and a half. I wrote a lot of detailed tasting notes, and I wanted to read you a few lines from that. I called out some interesting tasting notes, and I thought I was crazy, but now that I'm tasting this again, I don't think I'm that crazy. So let me read this. In this case, batch 17 doesn't come off very dark. It's more middle of the road and smells quite bitter. It's oddly nutty too. I say maybe cashew. I guess I'm reaching maybe there. This is a weird batch, and frankly, I don't like it. These notes are strange. Here we go. This is weird. Bitter dandelion sap. So I don't know if you guys were ever kids and you picked a yellow dandelion and then you broke the stem. There's this sap that comes out of the stem. And if you lick it, it's super bitter. It's like licking a 9-volt battery. So I said bitter dandelion sap, soot and ash, which actually I understand, cashew, fried food, latex. Some of this maybe, it might be a reach, but I'm actually kind of understanding what I was talking about. Dark chocolate, okay, maybe to go along with the bitterness. Candied fruit, white pepper, and menthol. I don't know what I was smoking that day to pick those up specifically, but I kind of stand by those tasting notes. So let's go ahead and talk final thoughts on these whiskeys now. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up. Obviously the winner is batch 16 for my comparison. I'm gonna go ahead for batch 17 and give this an 80 out of 100. So a B-. It's not unbelievably offensive, it's just really not for me. Especially in this comparison, it becomes obvious how many flaws this has. Batch 16, on the other hand, I think is pretty phenomenal stuff. So we're gonna go 87 out of 100 for batch 16, 80 out of 100 for batch 17. Who's gonna enjoy these pours? Well, let's talk generally about Stagg Jr, right? If you like high proof whiskey, you don't mind a little bit of youth, a little bit of ethanol on those, and you like a darker profile, and you're also a Buffalo Trace fan, these are totally for you. Who's not gonna like this? Someone who wants a really aged whiskey, something with a smoother, rounder drinking experience, something refined. That's really not what you're gonna get here. And also, if you're looking for Stagg Jr, you're probably gonna be paying over the SRP of around 60 bucks. So if you want a good value, or if you want to find a cheaper whiskey, this is also probably not gonna be for you. So can I recommend these whiskeys? Yes, depending on what you like. If you liked batch 15, you're probably gonna like batch 17. If you liked batch 12, you're probably gonna like batch 16, or 13 also would go along with that as well. So I think that's all I've got, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of both of these batches. If I'm crazy for calling out these weird notes on batch 17. If you've done this comparison, I would love to hear from you to find out what you think about these and what your preference is, because I think this is definitely a subjective comparison. But I'm looking forward to batch 18, which is on the way, and I'll get that review out as soon as I can for all of you, assuming the bottle makes it here safely. And I'm gonna be, really excited to see if the profile changes in any sort of definable way, or if it just feels like another extension of the Stagg Jr line, just without the Junior. So that is all I've got, guys. Check out the Patreon if you want to help support the channel anymore. Otherwise, I'm gonna end this video with a sip of Stagg Jr batch 16, 130.9 proof of purple fruit, sweet honey goodness. Cheers, and I'll see you next time here on Drums and Drams.